Today I want to welcome Karin Wilkinson. She is author of Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She is a regular writer and contributor to L.A. Marzulli's monthly newsletter, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. She is a wife, mother, and grandmother. She worked in the software industry for many years before leaving to raise her family. For as early as she can remember, she has been abducted by non-human alien entities, possibly hundreds of times, and has seen many UFOs and UAPs throughout her lifetime. Karin, welcome. How you doing?
Hi, Chris. Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm very, very happy to be here with you today.
Well, I'm happy you're here. I'm very excited to get into today's discussion. We're going to get into your experiences and provide your insights into the activities and motives of certain extraterrestrial beings. And you have unfortunately had some extremely unpleasant and traumatic experiences from this phenomena. And I know that it's very important that we explore all sides of this, and that's what we do here on this show. That's what this show is all about. Now, before we get into your experiences, this is your first time on. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how this all started for you.
Great. Well, Chris, I'm just an average, everyday wife, mom, grandma, working, and really never expected any of this to happen. But what's not average about me is that I've been taken by non-human alien entities from my earliest memories, from as early as I can remember. And so it started, like I said, from as early as I can remember. And I never really expected that I would be sharing this information, but here I am today, and God really put me on this path. And so that's my general information in a nutshell.
Great. Now, from what you can remember from the earliest experiences, tell us about your recall from that.
Right. I've always had these memories. It's not like some kind of memory that just suddenly appeared later in life, or that I went through any kind of their regression or anything like that. These memories just were always with me. I was remembering a lot of what was happening to me. Obviously not every time, but many times. And so I from my earliest memories, I would wake up at night and just feel a change in the room, and they would be there. There would appear usually two, sometimes four of the typical, what you call gray alien entities that most people are familiar with: the
Mhm.
bulbous heads, the big black vacuous screen looking eyes. And that's where the abduction experiences would start. I was so little, and I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't understand who and what they were. We didn't have the things we have today. We didn't have the books and the movies and the podcasts and things to explain it. So for me, it was just such a terrifying and confusing experience. And I was just always looking for a way to hide, a place to hide from them. And I even in my book I write about, when I was little, I thought maybe if I could find a suitcase that was big enough and get it under the bed and get in it and zip it up, because my grandma had zip up suitcases, that they wouldn't be able to find me there. I was just anything I could do to try to get out of their reach,
Mhm.
because it was terrifying, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't realize who and what they were at the time.
Now, how did your understanding of what was happening begin to evolve and unfold, and how did you become aware of the motives of these beings?
Sure. I think that came much later in life. But as I was growing older and as more information was coming out, I realized, I had to much later in life when I realized kind of what they were. And I still didn't know for sure because, every time I would see, even until just recently, every time I would see a picture, a book with a picture on it, or a movie or a television show or something like that, I could not watch or read anything about this because it was too scary and too triggering for me. This thing has been in my life all of my life. And
Mhm.
what happened is I had a near-death experience. I call it in the book a near-life experience because it was closer to life than death. And I really feel like my life kind of started over at that point, where I was in a hospital and I was given a paralytic instead of a sedative. No one was around me. I was just in an operating room waiting for the surgery to start. And
Oh.
I died on the operating table. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, it was the most peace and love I've ever felt in my life. It was just a beautiful sense of love and peace. And, what struck me the most is I was still me. I still had my personality. I still felt like myself without, the body, but just who you are to yourself was still with me. And after that, though, I went through some PTSD therapy because the fact that I was paralyzed and just lay there and dying and died on the table was like drowning without water. And
Wow.
I just had terrible PTSD from it. So that therapy actually helped me deal with the other things that had been plaguing me my whole life. These experiences that I had had with these non-human entities.
Now, I just have to
And
ask real quick. You
mhm,
were under a paralytic. Were you
mhm.
also aware of the pain and the sensations that were occurring?
Yes,
Oh
absolutely.
my goodness!
Until
Wow.
and so yeah, my body felt like cement and I couldn't breathe.
Oh
And
wow.
I think that just overtook more than anything else because I realized, oh no, I can't breathe. I can't
Oh
signal
wow.
to anyone. There's no one around me. I wasn't hooked up to anything yet. There were some nurses messing around with things in the room. My doctor was in another room because once I had and I'll get to that. But
Mhm.
so all of a sudden, I'm just like, God help me. And all of a
My
sudden, I heard a
God.
voice as clear as day in my head say, "It's okay. You can let go now," which sounds kind of corny, but it's exactly what the voice
Yeah.
said. And just in an instant, like in a blink of an eye, not even, I was out of my body and there was no pain. There was no fear. It wasn't, there was just nothing. It was just happy and blissful and peaceful and beautiful and lovely. And I could see everything happening in all the rooms around the room I was in. It's like walls didn't stop me from seeing. I could see the doctor getting ready, and I saw the nurse run in and tell him that I wasn't breathing, and he comes running in, yelling, "Bagger, bagger!" And I watched them try to revive me, and eventually they intubated me, and that's when they got me breathing again, and everything went black. So I'm assuming at that point I
Wow.
popped back into my body, and the recovery process was really difficult. I've had many surgeries from what has happened to my body, things they can't just explain why. And they were trying to bring me out of the anesthesia in recovery. Every time they would, I was screaming and in pain so badly. I'm thinking, coming back into this body was not not an easy jump. And
Yeah.
every time they tried to bring me out of anesthesia, they had to put me back down under because and sedated because they didn't want me to have a heart attack or a stroke. Well, I'd already had a stroke at that point. Um, which is why this side of my face doesn't move very much, just in case anyone's wondering.
Hmm.
Um, but about 3.5 hours into that, I remember them bringing me out and I'm screaming in pain, and I'm just like, God help me again. And all of a sudden, two orderlies show up at the foot of my bed and they helped me through it. They calmed me down. I felt love and peace from them. I was just like, you remind me of my kids. Oh, you remind me of my sons. You're just so sweet, so beautiful. Thank you. I was just thanking them profusely. We get up to the room and I want to introduce my husband and my daughter-in-law to them, and they're not there, and nobody knows who I'm talking about. So I
Wow.
had an angelic experience with these
Right.
guys. They didn't have any. And I realized thinking about it, yeah, they were just two young men wearing scrubs. They look like orderlies, but they didn't have any badges. They didn't have anything, like that. No stethoscopes around their neck, nothing like
Oh
that.
wow.
And they were just gone. And nobody, and they were with me all the way up to the room. And so I'm like saying to the nurse, well, they were right here in the elevator with us. They came down the hall with us. Where did they go? Nobody knew who I was talking about. They're like, honey, there was no one else with you. You must be
Wow.
delirious.
Yeah.
So that was a really amazing. So, there are amazing experiences that happen
Mhm.
too. There are really good, beautiful, angelic experiences out there. And I put those things in the book because I don't want it to be
Mm.
just this awful, scary account.
Right,
of
right.
what's happened in my life, because they're good things too.
And
But
that's the
that's
thing.
really,
I've only experienced the positive, beautiful, angelic side of this, and
that's
that's
good.
all I can frame my reference from experiences from. So that's why I love to hear the other side, because it's so important, because there is this other side that so many people, probably just as many people, experience. So
Right.
apologies for cutting you off. Where were we? Where were
No,
we
no,
at?
you're fine. That's good. And yeah, I mean, beautiful experiences and experiences with good, angelic, non-fallen, non-evil beings.
Mm,
That's wonderful. We need to share more of those stories, because I feel like everyone gets really hung up on the scary stuff. I get it. I understand. But after that, when I had that PTSD therapy, it actually helped me deal with this to the point that I'm like, I have to, now that I'm dealing with it, I talked to my husband about it, talked him through it, and I'm like, I'm not sure what to do with this. And God led me to LA Marzulli. I
mm,
met him at a conference and shared my story, and it became um, a part of his fourth movie in the UFO series on abductions, on the abduction
mhm.
phenomenon. And I was terrified when that came out, because here I was putting my testimony out there, telling my story. My face, my words were out there. And he's like, thank you for being brave enough. And I'm just like, I'm not sure I'm that brave,
Yeah.
but it was out there. And people started coming up to me and thanking me for sharing that story, because they had similar stories and just didn't feel like there would be anyone they could share that with, any way to deal with it, any way to work through it. Um, and so it led me to write the book, because I wanted to share more about what happened, and more about how to stop it too. If someone's,
Hmm.
in one of these positions where they're being taken against their will, and it's not a good situation, and they're not benevolent creatures, then I wanted to share how to stop it as well, and share the truth about what's been going on my
Yeah.
whole life, because this is just like this ugly little secret that isn't out there and needs to be out there, because it's not just these alien entities. There were humans there too the whole
Mm,
time, from the
mhm,
time I was little.
mhm.
There would be other children there. There were other humans there
Now, were
working with.
these humans seemingly in military garbs?
Not all of them. Some
Mhm,
of them were. You could tell
mhm,
some of them were kind of like guards and things like that.
mhm,
But the funny thing is, the military uniforms weren't. I guess they were pretty similar, but there were people that were in like lab coats, or people that were in like
mhm,
street clothes, and then there were
mm,
people that were in these like weird, um, really benign kind of beige looking smocks and pants kind of outfits that were just all the same, so like they didn't stand out. They were just, it was a really kind of unisex benign outfit some people had on. And yeah, from the time I was little, these people were there. And I realized later in life that some of these people, I don't think, had any idea what they were getting into,
mm.
and didn't really want to be there. But at that point, I think once you're in there, you're in a program that you're threatened not to stop. I know they were threatening people, because they utilized me as part of the threat process. So, yeah, from the time I was little there, and I want to share that, because our government's starting to talk about it, but they're not still not talking about their involvement in it.
Were
And
these experiences physical, or would you consider them a inner consciousness experience?
these were physical, tactile experiences. I was
Okay.
physically taken from my home,
Mm,
physically abused, physically sexually abused, physically abused. I had tests done on me. I had, anything you can imagine, blood taken, checking every part of my body, physical examinations, internal examinations, very things that were very intrusive
mhm,
throughout my whole life. I'd come home, wake up with marks on my body. I'd wake up with my pajamas inside out. When I was little and they'd show up, I would wet the bed, things like that, just because I was so
mhm,
scared. I knew they were coming. And I didn't know how to stop it. I mean, I couldn't stop them from taking me. And there was a short reprieve for a little while in my late teens, early 20s, when I was um, going to a faith-filled church with my friends, and I had really found my faith, and my studying the Bible, and found found that, but then I fell away from that. And when I did, it started up again, just like it had before.
Interesting. Could you possibly go over some of the most profound experiences to your best ability? Tell us what was happening, what they were doing, and then we'll get into the why after.
Sure. I can go through like a typical scenario, as far as when they would take me.
Sure.
Usually, like I said, I would feel the room, I just feel change in the atmosphere, and sometimes there would be a very low hum. Sometimes a bright light would come through the window or be outside the window. When we were in the country, sometimes all the crickets and cicadas and night noises would just stop. It would go silent. And when these gray entities would show up, they would switch me into a state of sleep paralysis where I could still see and hear everything going on, but I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything to fight back or to defend myself. And they would levitate me off the bed, and I would literally go up through a ceiling or out a closed window. And I know that sounds impossible, but the feeling in my body would be like this intense vibratory feeling where it felt like I was made out of a million bazillion ball bearings or little pieces or something. And as I was going through it, it was just the strangest sensation. I don't have anything here I can compare it to very well. So that would, and sometimes at that point too, I would be kind of switched off, like put to sleep. And often there would be screen memories given to me. So I would be there, I'd wake up on a table, they'd be doing examinations, I'd be very unhappy with that. And so all of a sudden it would look like I was somewhere else, like a happy place, like I'm walking around on the farm in the field or something like that. They try to mask what's happening or just switch you back off, put you back to sleep like they would for surgery or something like that. So for me, there are times when I have a lot of memories of just walking around the hallways. Generally, it was underground in a facility because we would get in these elevators that would just go straight down. And it seemed like a long way. They were cold. And then I would get on what I would describe and what felt like to me is another elevator that went side to side. And I always described it as an elevator when I was little, thinking about it too, because it didn't have any noise and it didn't bump like a vehicle would or a train or something. But now I realize that it was most likely like a high-speed rail type system that I was being put on because there were seats. It was larger than a normal elevator, and it was also very cold. I just remember always being cold. When I was little, I would try to go to sleep and clutch my blanket, and I called it my cold blanket. Not because the blanket was cold, but because I wanted it, because I knew it was going to be cold. And I would just, if I clutched it, I could, when they got me, it would stay with me and I'd have something to keep me warmer. So a lot of things like that. A lot of times I would have needles, put into my chest or into my neck or different, I don't know if they were inserting, I don't know what they were doing, honestly. Sometimes it seemed like x-ray machines and things I didn't understand when I was younger. Definitely.
Was there any particular event that prompted you to come out with this information?
The event that prompted me to come out with it was after I had done the PTSD therapy and I was dealing with it. I realized, and I had all these missing pregnancies where I knew that they were taking the baby. I would get pregnant. I would have the pregnancies verified by a doctor. I would be, very pregnant, like in the first trimester, and it would all be verified, all the tests and go to the doctor and everything. And then in sometime at the end of the first trimester, I would have terrible pain, but I wouldn't pass anything, nothing comes out. And then I would go into an emergency room, see a doctor, and they would do an ultrasound or the thing, and no heartbeat, no baby, have a DNC, no fetal tissue. Baby just like no fetal tissue. If you have a normal miscarriage, there's going to be something left inside. Nothing. It was clean. And I knew that what they were doing because I had had instances where I was taken and given a baby to hold, a hybrid
I was
infant.
just about to ask you that.
Yeah, and that was really, I mean, just losing these pregnancies alone was so heartbreaking because I didn't get to mourn those babies. I didn't know what happened to them. I didn't know what was going on, and I was just, it was so hard. And then they give me this baby to hold. So I'm going down this hallway. So in this instance, I'm going down this hallway, right? And it's just lined with what looks like aquariums in the wall. I don't know if you've ever been to a pet store where the walls like lined with aquariums, but that's
Yeah.
what it looked like. Only there weren't fish in them, there were fetuses in them. And the hallway in the aquariums was lit like red, like backlit kind of red. So it was really dark, like almost in a when you're doing photo development kind of thing, like that kind of red. So it was a real dark, darkly lit, backlit kind of red color, kind of a red purple color. And at the end of the hallway, they took me into a room. It was a small room, like the size of a big closet. And there was another woman in there with a baby. And they, one of these, it's a gray. There's a different kind of gray than the kind that would come to pick me up when you're on in the facilities or on a ship or wherever you are with them. There's one they're taller. They look different. They have more wrinkled skin. Their eyes move side to side. They have mouths that open. They have a lot more features to them. Have a lot more have more of a normal build to them than the
More
little grays.
humanoid-ish.
Yeah, they look more physically accurate than the types of grays that people see. I've written a lot about the grays that come to get people because I really believe they're like an avatar, like a skin suit. Anyway, this gray looked like a woman, man. It's so hard to tell. You can't tell. They're androgynous, really. Hands me this little baby, and it's very small, and it's very reddish purple in color, and it's very curled up into itself. Its head is bigger than a normal baby's head would be. Its eyes were very large. And I held it up to me, but it wouldn't cuddle into my body. It was just like holding an empty, sack of flour or something up to your body. It just wouldn't cuddle into me. And it was alive, but it just didn't respond to me. And I'm holding it against me, trying to, I knew it was mine. I could tell just by looking at it. There's some instinct that, moms have where we know which babies are, so we can pick them out of a crowd. I knew that was my baby, and I held it up to me. It just wouldn't cuddle into me. And I was getting really upset because I'm like, what's wrong with my baby? And it kept telling me, it's a good baby. It's a good baby. It's fine. Just hold your baby. It's a good baby. And I'm like, it's not, something's wrong with it. And then, they went to take it back, and I didn't want him to take it back, though. I wanted to keep it. I'm like, no, I want to take it home. I want to take it with me. I want to keep it. No, you can't keep it, and then switched off just because I was getting combative about it. I wasn't going to let go of my baby. And that was really, it was really hard to deal with. Like I said, once I had the PTSD therapy, I was able to start to process these really difficult events and feelings. And then I knew if those babies were still out there and they were still alive, I wanted them. I wanted to take care of them. I wanted to see them. I thought, they're half me. They've got to be half good in them or something. I can help them. I can raise them. I can be a part of their life. I want this. I mean, I have children. I love my children. They are my life. I love them. I have children that we've adopted. I have children that are natural, born to us. I love my children. And so I wanted these children too. And I woke up one night, and there were 3 beings standing by the end of my bed. And I knew they were my kids. They weren't human, but they weren't not human. They were somewhat human. They looked enough like my kids to be my kids, because initially I thought they were my other kids. And my other kids are grown, but they're at home a lot. So I said one of their names out loud. I'm like, what are you doing? And then I realized, oh, that's not him. That's not them. And I was very excited because all of a sudden I realized these are my kids. I wanted to jump off the bed and just get them, But as soon as and I hit my husband, I'm like, wake up, and he's not moving. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And all of a sudden I get hit with sleep paralysis, like a wall of water, just boom. And they're like, come with us, come with us. And so, and I'm like, no, they're talking to me in my head now, because now I've got sleep paralysis. Now I can't even vocalize. And I'm like, no, I can't come with you, but I just feel this evil coming off of them, right? I should have mentioned that too. I wanted to just jump up and hug them, but they're looking at me like they want to kill me. I'm like, what's wrong? And they had zero love for me. They were just evil. It was just emanating off of them. They were probably about 4.5 feet tall, maybe. They were really dark in color, like almost a purplish color skin. And their eyes were very, very dark. And where they were standing, it was really dark around them. Like, I don't know if that had something to do with, if they were in another astral or something, but they looked as physically real as someone else standing beside me. So it didn't seem like that. But and they started trying to levitate me off the bed. And I felt that old familiar terror. And I'm like, no, you can't just take me. I mean, if I was going to go, I was going to go of my own will, And all of a sudden I'm like, no, you can't just take me, in Jesus' name, no. And as soon as I said the name Jesus, they were gone. And my husband sat up and was like, what? Like he had just heard me, and it had been like 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, or however long it had been for the interaction between us. And I'm like, wow, okay, I guess there isn't anything there for me with them. They didn't really want to love me. They were just, there was nothing kind there. There was no love there. And I felt like God gave me that experience so I could see that I hadn't lost anything, that, I had not done anything that I was supposed to do. Let's put it that way. Because I have lost something. I've lost children, and it's devastating. And I'm literally just getting to the point where I can talk about this without crying. And because then I'll probably cry later about it, but it's just still so devastating. But so that happened, and that's when I thought, I have to talk to somebody about this. And I'm like, who do I talk to?
Yeah.
And I heard an interview with L.A. Marzulli on somebody's show. And so I reached out to him, and he told me to meet him at this conference that was nearby us if I wanted to talk and share my story. So I did. And that's how that interview came to be. I did not know I was going to sit down and tell him my story. I really didn't think I was going to go into all of that, but I did. And that's what led to then, that coming out and everything, and the whole thing went from there. Then I was running it after that came out. Then it's on film. I'm out there. I'm sharing that story, and people are coming to me, thanking me for sharing my testimony. And I didn't expect that. And then wanting to tell me their stories, and I didn't expect that. And then people had a lot of questions. I didn't expect that. So that's when I really felt compelled to write the book. And it was a very strong urge to write the book. And that's when I started doing that.
Well, I'm glad you did, and I'm sure there's many others that are extremely happy that you did, because sharing your story definitely helps others understand what's going on with them, and I get a sense that this is happening to a lot more people than we could ever realize, which I want to get to in a minute. But before we do, there's a few things that are happening behind what you just discussed with the hybridization program that I want to get to. And you believe that this is a very important aspect of what could be unfolding in our reality right now as far as an extremely nefarious extraterrestrial agenda, right?
Right. I really do. Yeah, I think that the hybridization program is well underway. You see people being taken and having, sperm and ovum, eggs, blood taken. You see the cattle mutilations where they're draining these cattle of blood and fluids. And bovine blood is very compatible with human blood. And I think they're utilizing that in this whole process, and utilizing blood and tissue for the breeding processes. I think they're utilizing it for their own selves as well. I think that they feed off of that as well. And that's kind of another part of the story. But and so yeah, I do think there's a breeding program. I think they're selecting people with certain genetics. That's why they stay in family lineages, because when they find someone whose genome is compatible enough to be able to create a hybrid entity, they want to stick within that genetic lineage and keep working with it. So people also say, why do you think it runs in families? Well, the genetics are similar from one generation to the next, especially if one person has the same blood type as the mother and the grandmother or the grandfather or whatever, whoever was being taken.
Mm-hmm. Now, you alluded to this earlier, and I want to explore this deeper, that the understanding we have of extraterrestrials is limited when it comes to what's really happening in those realms, and it's more of a spiritual war, right?
I do think so, yeah. I believe these entities that I have been in contact with, not the good angelic entities that I've had, like in my experience in the hospital, but the ones that were taking me. And I had a gentleman with me my whole life. I write about him in the book and describe him as my handler. He was with me my whole life. He was when I was taken, he would be there. He would be there to keep me calm, to guide me, to give me information, to teach me.
And he seemed human to you?
He appeared as a human.
Okay.
Until later in life, when I really felt a great deal of affection and comfort with him. And I asked him to, show me what he really looked like, because I knew he didn't really look like that, because I would see sometimes when we were in the middle of certain activities, it was like static, and I would see him start to change. And so I knew he looked different. And he showed me his true identity. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my throat today. He showed me his true identity, and he was what you might call a reptilian. I've looked at pictures. I've looked for anything that might look like him. I haven't seen anything that looks like him. There's some that are kind of similar, but he was truly beautiful. He was very tall, very muscular. I mean, like 8 feet tall, at least. I'm not really good at judging, that, but he was very, very tall when he would show me that. It was like, I don't know if I was seeing like a hologram image when I was seeing the man, or if it was shape-shifting, because he was too much really tactilely a man to not, I don't think, be changing his complete form. But when he shifted into the reptilian form, I mean, he was beautiful. He was absolutely stunning. I mean, it was the typical, flat ears back against the head. His nose was a very flattened, triangular to the tip against his face, kind of ridged eyebrows and a very long kind of ridged mouth. But he had like these they weren't scales, but scales is the best way I can describe it. And they were like opalescent, like opals, like that blue-green kind of beautiful opal kind of color, almost sparkly. He was beautiful. I mean, and I was very attached to him. I mean, he was with me and he made me feel safe, because I saw terrible, things happening in the backgrounds, or I could hear other bad things happening to other people. I knew with him I was safe, to a degree. I mean, because still I was being raped, I was being tortured, there were things that were happening to me, but it was supposedly for the greater good, And but I believe that he was a fallen angelic entity. And I believe that, except for the grays that come to the type of grays that would be in the room, the kind of grays that most people see, the shorter grays, that these entities that I was in contact with on these ships or underground, where I was mostly in these underground facilities, are fallen angelic entities. And I know that sounds kind of out there, but they're not from another planet. I was never taken to another planet. They never were coming and going from anywhere. This is where they lived, underground.
Yeah.
They're right beneath our feet.
Yeah.
And these entities are smarter than we are. They're far more advanced than we are. They understand going in and out of different realms, different astral realms and things that we don't do, and they're far older than we are. They're from a time they were created long before us.
This is incredible. As far as the hybrids and possibly these shape-shifting beings, if they can shape-shift into a human at will to a believable enough degree that they may be among us right now, as well as the hybrids, correct?
They could be. He never personally came into my space outside of being in the underground facilities. I don't think that they can be in our sunlight or something like that, because I never ever saw him in my home or outside during the daylight ever. And I think there are a lot of limitations on them that we don't understand, but I don't know what those limitations are. All I know is where I've never seen them. And the grays seem to always be the ones that people run into, as far as when they're being taken. And the grays are basically an avatar, like a meat suit, for lack of a better word. I've seen the empty gray suits, stacked on the floor. Other abductees have seen them hanging up on hangers or stacked in drawers or in corners. And I believe that these are just like avatar suits they use that either they can get into, they can use AI to run them. And I think they're also inhabited by demonic entities, by demons. Biblically, we know, and from the book of Enoch, that demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. So they would be they would be a step below the fallen angelic beings, and these guys would be, able to order them around and that kind of thing. And they're always looking for a body. So a gray suit would make perfect sense for them to be in, especially the way they act too. They're just evil, but they can't speak because that mouth doesn't open on the gray suit. And those things are like frail. They're not very, it looks like you could just break them in half.
Do you think what's happening now with the mainstream disclosure and all the information coming out of those areas, that we are going to, within our lifetime, have an experience where humanity encounters these beings?
Well, I mean, you mean all of humanity, like they're brought forth in front of us?
Well, I think not necessarily, but maybe that there's something that may occur that we have an understanding that they are real.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I think a lot of humanity is already having experiences and encounters with these things. I think more than we know. Most people don't want to come forward with this because people will say you're crazy. And I get that. I mean, I really do. I understand that better than most, but it's really happening, and it's really happening to so many people. I mean, you have no idea how many people I hear from on a daily basis about this thing. But I think people already have a lot of contact. I mean, we know we've had crashed ships. We know our government has admitted to having the ships. They admitted to having the bodies. I don't think we'll ever get full disclosure, not from our current leaders. And I say that because they would have to admit to their involvement. And like I said, there have been humans involved in this all along. And we're not talking about just picking people up and grabbing some genetic material and dropping them off. We're talking about raping women in front of crowds of people so that they won't talk. Wow. We're talking about, stealing fetuses from them when they're pregnant. And these are just things that have happened to me, and I'm sure worse atrocities have happened to other people. And I've talked to other people who've had terrible things happen, but I won't share the stories that aren't mine. But
well, do you see a greater connection with the agendas that have been unfolding recently and the connections to the shadowy entities that are behind the scenes and possibly working with our military-industrial complex and three-letter agencies? You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think that connection's been there, and I think that will continue to be there. And the problem is it's getting harder and harder to hide these things. because we are living in an age where if something happens in Australia, I can see that in a second from someone. They can share that information instantaneously, and we're all carrying around these little computers in our pockets that can take videos and pictures, and we can all look things up. And there's just so much information sharing now that instead of things being old wives' tales or folk tales or written down and maybe someone might get a copy of the book, we're sharing this information in real time. So it's getting harder and harder to hide. Like if Roswell happened today, all those people would have had all of that on their phones, and that would be all over the internet, right? They can't stop them all. Someone's going to have a copy of it somewhere. So I think that it's just getting harder and harder not to have some form of disclosure. And I think we will continue to see more and more information come out, just because I think the more information that accidentally comes out, I think that's what's going to dictate how much we're given and how much is released to the general public. Because unless the powers that be, the 3-letter agencies, the people doing these things, unless they have to, they don't seem like they want to let go of anything, because we have these whistleblowers and all these people who are trying to talk, but it's still being, they're still being gagged. They're still being muzzled. They're still not allowed to share. And there are still deathbed confessions going on. And there are still people who are trying to talk, but then constantly being attacked. People like me, people like L.A. Marzulli, there's a lot of people out there that are trying to share, people like you, trying to share good information, and they get stopped at every turn because they don't want all this information out there. But I think the more information that comes out, the more they'll have to share. I don't think that the public is going to have a problem with it. They're always like, oh, people will panic. It'll be like War of the Worlds again. No, they need to give people more credit. I think people are really able to handle that information and make their own choices and make their own choices as to what they believe these entities are and what they believe their purpose is. I don't believe them to be our benevolent space brothers. I'm not asking everyone to believe the way I do, and I'm not discounting anyone else's thoughts or accounts of things that have happened to them. I think anyone coming forward should be applauded, supported, and listened to. And I think people should just make their own decisions and choices based on the information they have and the information they can find. And then they need to just pray about it and choose how they want to believe. Personally, the things that happened to me, they weren't benevolent. Kidnapping a small child, that's not good behavior. Raping women, that's not good behavior. Stealing babies, that's not good behavior. Unwanted medical examinations, that's not good behavior. Look at the poor little cows in the fields and things like that. So, you can't deny that some of it is definitely not benevolent. Not at all.
Well, it seems, based on my own experiences and the experiences of others who have benevolent contact, most of these experiences are not physical at all. Most of the benevolent experiences are through dream states, astral states, meditative states. They will have visions, but all these visions will be beautiful, or near-death experiences like yourself. This is the most common experiences where people will have contact with these benevolent angelic beings. And you believe that the good side of this is those benevolent angelic beings. The dark side are these interdimensional extraterrestrial beings. And this is something that I've believed for a long time, that we're not really dealing with space aliens, that they're not coming from different planets across the solar system, that they're right here just beyond the spectrum of our perception and vision, right?
Right. I agree with you 100%. These are not space aliens from Alpha, Beta, Zeta, whatever planet, no. And those people who believe that, I'm like, well, where is that information coming from? Did one of these come and tell you, or, and can you vet your source? Because even something in an astral plane, you don't know if it's lying to you,
right,
or being honest to you. So, but I can tell you what I've seen personally, and what other people have physically seen personally, is that they're right under our feet. They're underground, and they are in the skies too, because that's how they get around. That's how they travel.
Right.
And I think for me, as a Christian, I do believe that there are fallen angelic entities and then there are non-fallen, because when Satan fell, he took a third of the angels with him, right? So I believe that that third that's fallen, those are the malevolent, the bad ones that are doing the bad things to people.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also had encounters with the good, benevolent angelic entities. Those, when I had my encounter with them, they didn't take anything from me, they didn't do anything bad to me. They came and they helped me in answer to a prayer that I prayed to God, and he sent them to do that. And it was just good, and it was just love, and there was no, it wasn't taken against my will. Nothing bad happened to me. It was just a beautiful, loving experience. So, I can't, I can easily separate those two events and say, yes, this was good and this one was bad. And I can easily say that there are good angelic beings and there are fallen or bad angelic beings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as being able to tell the difference, if there was a good one and a bad one standing in front of us, and we ask them which one of you is the good and which one is the bad, because they're probably going to look exactly the same, are they going to tell us? They're probably both going to say they're the good one, right? Because the fallen one is going to want to get whatever it is that one is after, is going to have his own or her own purposes or what have you as well. So, if we don't have the discernment, and especially when we're going into astral realms and things like that, if we're not sure that we have the right discernment, that we know for sure a good from an evil, because these fallen ones, they're really here to deceive.
Mm-hmm.
And they're much, much better at it than we are. They're much stronger, they're much smarter, and they're much more capable, because they are a superior being in that respect. So, I caution anyone, to be careful, because there's beautiful, you should absolutely have an experience with a really lovely, good, benevolent being, like you say you've had. And I think that's amazing. But you never know what you're going to get.
Right.
And trust me, they can come across as good until they're not. And then you'll know, at some point you'll know for sure. But so hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, 100%. Thank you.
It's kind of a 4-part question. So,
that's all good. Are you still having experiences of any kind?
They are not taking me anymore, and they know that they can't, because I understand the hierarchy now.
Okay.
There is a hierarchy, there is a pecking order, and Jesus is at the top of that. He's the savior. I can call on him, and when I do, his authority is greater than theirs, and they back off. I mean, you call the name of Jesus, they're like, okay, yeah, we know. They don't like it. They've still come like outside the window. They'll still be out there. I know when they're out there. I feel it. I can still feel their presence from time to time. I had an astral encounter about a month ago with the handler. I don't have a name for him, because we didn't use names. We had an imprint on each other, kind of like animals do. So I knew him and he knew me, but they didn't use names. So everyone keeps asking me what was his name, and it's like, we didn't have a name because I didn't need one. It's the hard, I can't really describe it, but it's the only thing that comes close, is the way animals know each other in nature. Anyway, I had an encounter with him. He took me into an astral. We were back in the underground, in the older part of it. There's an older part in the underground where you can still see the tunnels carved out, and it's very darkly lit. And he wanted me to come back and offered me basically the world. I can take away your pain. I can give you everything you want. I can, make everything good. I can make I can fix all the problems, blah, blah, blah. Knew everything that was wrong in my life, everything that was harsh or bad or difficult. I have a lot of physical pain. And I said no. And the thing is, and he's really trying to be convincing. And he's this far from my face. I mean, right up in my face. And the weirdest thing about it was, he didn't look healthy. He didn't look like he did before. He was more of an ashy gray green, like a flat color. I've never seen him look that way before. He always was almost shiny and beautiful and just glowing. It was gone. It looked like he was dying. I don't know, but I could tell something was wrong. I could tell he was sick or something. So I don't know if it's just him, if it's other ones too. I heard recently someone else had a similar experience and similar thing happened. I have a lot of abductee friends who had handlers as well, like that. So it's not an uncommon thing that we have this one that was always with us. Um, so something's going on in that realm.
It would be
I don't know
wonderful
what
if
it is.
they are all dying and losing the
Wouldn't that
power
be
from the
great?
dark side, right?
Wouldn't that be great? Yes. But I'm just saying, make sure yeah, just watch out, because
Mm,
the thing is, if there is something like that happening, then they'll get more aggressive. They'll get more
right.
frantic, because
Well,
there's
you know,
something
if you
that they
look at
need
everything
from
that's
us.
happened since 2020, and if we're connecting these horrible events to these beings, which I most likely would,
Oh, absolutely.
then
Yes.
it seems that they're in a frantic panic mode right now, that
Yeah.
they are already losing and they know this.
They know they're losing. Yeah. And they know that their team is going to lose in the end, but they somehow still think, and I think sometimes it's, if you know you're losing, you're still going to do as much damage as you can on the way down.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you're getting towards the end and your time is short, you're really going to start doing damage. So, I think it's going to become a more dangerous world that we live in. Just, if that's the case, it's going to be very dangerous, and people need to really get themselves right with where they want to be in their faith and in their walk and their journey in their life. Just be comfortable with who you are and where you stand,
Hmm.
because the end could be just around the corner. We just don't know.
Yeah.
But these things, something's going on, and I do feel the veil getting thinner.
Hmm.
I really do. I have seen what looks like windows opening up in front of me, and it's either someone trying to remote view on me, or it's a portal opening up right in front of me.
Wow.
And I've seen it in the past, but it's never been just like in the room, in just a random room in the house or somewhere.
Mhm.
And this is happening more and more. And I'm like, it's got to be the veil getting thinner. It really does, because I think there must be just so much activity right now. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it is. We're in very interesting times, to say the least.
Mm.
Now, for the last few minutes, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier, how there's most likely more people that are having these experiences than we realize, maybe even more people that are having their memories blocked that might be experiencing these very same things but aren't able to recall them for whatever reason. Do
Right.
you think that that is the case?
I do, because it's very traumatic. I mean, I had my first kind of mini breakdown when I was about 6 years old, because I was so traumatic,
Hmm.
and I kind of found a way to separate the two, so that I could have my life here and then what was going on with them here, and not allow myself to even think about it when I was just going through, going to school, having dinner, going to that kind of thing. I think that one of the things that they pride themselves on is the ability to switch people off, to give people screen memories. But the more information that's out there, and people be like, oh yeah, I have those nights where I'm walking out in the field with all the giant bunny rabbits, or where, it's this, that, and like, it doesn't make any sense, because then people are starting to put the pieces together. I think it's a lot more people than we realize, because the number of people that I have talked to have said, well, I just never wanted to talk about it, but I had this happen. I had this happen. And they're everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
They're just your neighbor, your friend, your cousin, your dentist. It's everybody. And as soon as someone hears that I've written this book, they have a story to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't yet met someone who didn't. So that has to say something about how many people
Mm-hmm.
have had experiences.
Yeah. What advice would you give folks who may be starting to recall unusual memories, may be aware that something unusual is happening, but they don't understand it, or
Right.
even have memories of being taken like yourself? What advice would you give them?
Right. I would first say you're not alone, and that you can stop. These abductions can be stopped. If it's unwanted, you can stop it, and you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there in the same boat. Um, in my book, I talk about how to stop it, that you can call on Jesus, that there is authority, that our creator is at the top of that authority. There are a lot of amazing people out there and a lot of resources. You can just go search on the web. You can get therapy for PTSD. That worked for me, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't give anyone that kind of advice as far as, and how to deal with the emotional problems. But people can reach out to me on my website. I do get a lot of messages. I do get back to everybody. It does take some time, so please be patient because I do get a lot of messages, but I will get back to you if you want to just share a story. Sometimes there's just comfort in sharing your story.
Yeah.
You can reach out to people like L.A. Marzulli. They can reach out to, like your website. There's so many good resources out there. My friend, Vicky Joy Anderson.
I love
She has a
Vicky.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's my sister. Her book, They Only Come Out at Night, is an amazing resource. I highly recommend that book.
Yeah.
You can find hers at vickyjoyauthor.com. You can find mine at KarinWilkinsonauthor.com. And our books are for sale, both of them, exclusively right now at lamarzulli.net. So either one, her book is amazing. If someone needs a resource, I highly recommend. Like, she and I could just do these together because I can talk about what's happening and she talks about how to stop it.
Yeah.
and she's been an amazing resource, an amazing help for me. So I highly recommend that too.
Yeah, you're all great resources. Thank you so much for coming out with this information. And we really barely scratched the surface on some of this stuff.
Yeah,
So I'd love to
really.
have you back on in the future. We'll dive even deeper.